Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. So what have we got for you lovely lot today? Well, about 2 years ago I did a tutorial on 3 different ways to paint with gouache, and one of the exercises was painting this lovely old 1930s British Railway style poster, and gouache was the perfect medium because of those lovely flat colours that you can get. But I've had a number of you ask if I'd do another railway poster, so we're going to have another go, but this time we're going to paint in a more traditional watercolour way and have a go at painting this railway poster. And this time it's based on the lovely county of Cornwall. So come and join me and we'll paint this step by step together. Okay, so for today's materials, my paper is some Arches, it's cold press finish, £300, nice and thick so it won't need stretching, 100% cotton, but of course any decent watercolour paper will do. And my colours today: cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, cobalt blue, burnt sienna, burnt umber, Payne's grey, and just a little touch of sap green. And from my range, my brushes are a large mop, number 12 and a number 6 round. Okay, so here is the reference photo that this tutorial is based on. It's from Google Street View. Now, I simply took a virtual trip around the Cornish coast until I found something that I liked. And this is the tiny village of Crackington Haven, which I thought would make a cracking painting. See what I did there? And here's the pencil sketch, and as always, a free drawing template is available to download from my website, link in the description below. Off we go, and I'm starting by just painting the complete sky area with clean water using my large mop, carefully painting around the top of the cliff here. Then straight in with my number 12 brush and some cobalt blue, leaving lots of spaces for the clouds and trying to get some light and darker shades of the blue. Definitely lightening the value as I move closer to the horizon. And while that's still wet, I'm just dropping in some very subtle grey fluffy clouds with a little bit of Payne's grey. As always with skies, you have to work fairly quickly because you don't want to drop this grey in once that blue is dried. So while I'm waiting for the sky to dry, I'm just taking a little touch of masking fluid just to mask out these really bright little breaking waves. Next for the beach, and I'm still using my number 12 brush, and I'll list all the colours I'm using below. Now I'm dropping in some colours here while the paint is still damp, so I'm getting some unusual and odd drying times, but sometimes that can just add to the effect. So with rough old beaches where I'm looking for texture, I'm really not worried too much about drying lines. So just for ease and simplicity, and while I've got this colour on my brush, why don't I just continue painting everything else that has a similar hue? But I may leave the houses till later. Now for the sea, and it's really important you keep that horizon line nice and flat and level. And I'm using here a mixture of cobalt blue, just a little touch of sap green in it to give it that slight turquoise feel. And I'm lifting out here towards the horizon with a damp brush. And now for a little subtle reflection of the cliff into the water, I've just added some Payne's grey into the mix and dropping it in wetty wet. So now we need to let this totally dry. So it's a perfect time for a short break, and it's just got to be a glass of Cornish best. So now for the cliff in the background, and I'm starting by wetting with clean water. Now I'm going to be dropping in quite a few colours into this, so that's why I'm wetting it first, because I want to allow plenty of time for these colours to mix and blend directly on the paper. Again, I'll list all the colours I'm using below, but it probably is a good idea to have these already pre-mixed and ready to go. You don't want these original washes to dry because you're spending too much time mixing other colours. Now you can see from the reference photo that there is no strong divide where each colour starts and stops, so that's why I'm painting all wet in wet, helping me to get those natural transitions of colour. And I've switched here to my number 6 brush just to help me go carefully around these buildings. And for this darker green, I'm using my same mix of cadmium yellow and cobalt blue, but I've added in a little touch of Payne's grey. And I know I've said this before, but this is definitely a big advantage of using 100% cotton paper. It just stays wet that little bit longer and helps you with these wet in wet techniques. Right, so the cliffs are still a little bit damp, and I'm taking a plastic card and scraping in and scoring some rock textures. Now it's all about timing with this, because if your wash is still very wet, the paint will just creep back into the area you've pulled away. Now when that's dry, I can see those textures that I've created just a little bit light, so I'm going to just knock them back slightly with that sandy colour. Right, now for a bit of extra rock texture, I'm using the dry brush technique, keeping the brush nice and flat to the paper, picking up its texture. And I'm dabbing out with a tissue if I think it's just a little too strong. And the key to this dry brush texture is just to make sure your mix isn't too watery. And here I'm just sweeping a bit of green grass into the cliff here and softening the top edge so I get a more natural transition. Nice dark shadow underneath, and again this must go in while it's still wet. Now you might be looking at some of the colours that I mentioned below and be thinking that's not exactly a burnt umber, but to be fair, I'm picking up lots of different colours on my palette. It's always a little bit dirty. Now I had someone the other day ask me, when you list percentages below, how can I get these colours mixed exactly? Well, you can't. I mean, you've just got to remember that they're simply as a guide to give you a rough estimate of what the colour ought to be. Right, back to my number 6 brush for these dark rocks, and I'm using a 50-50 mix of burnt umber and Payne's grey, roughly. Right, now for this little river, and the goal here is to try and match the colours to the cliffs above to give the illusion of a water reflection. But it's important that all these colours blend together with soft edges. Now I'm not listing the colours as they are all the same as the ones I've used above. And you can see from the photo reference that the blue has a stronger, darker value than the actual sky. Okay, so now it's time for the houses, and I'm using that same sandy mix, but very watery version. Now, as I said earlier, I'm painting this in a fairly controlled, detailed way, so I'm painting here with my number 6 brush and trying to be as accurate as I can. Okay, let's finish off the scene now. So I'm taking a rubber eraser and just getting rid of all of that masking fluid. Then with my number 6 brush, painting in these waves. And the idea here is to paint this darker value in the gaps to give the impression that the white waves are rolling over. Back to the buildings now, and I'm using the same colour but a slightly thicker consistency to paint in the shadow side to the buildings. Few brick details on the wall here with a touch of burnt umber. Now for the roofs, and a nice watery Payne's grey to start with, still using my number 6 brush. And while it's still wet, lifting out some weathering effects with a damp brush. So when that's dry, same colour again, slightly thicker consistency to put in the shadow side of the roofs. And while we've got the colour mixed, let's paint in everything else that is the same colour. Okay, so we've got quite a large area of fairly boring road here, so what can we do to add a little bit of interest? Now, how about a cast shadow falling diagonally across the road? Now, we don't know where it's coming from, but that doesn't matter. Now, you may be thinking, whoa, Paul, far too dark. but trust me, it's going to dry lighter and it should be fine. Okay, just slowly beginning to build up the details here, and I'm using a watery burnt umber to put some shadows and details in the wall here and onto the beach. And this little area here, not sure what it is, could be some sort of car park or something, but I'm just painting in with similar colours and adding in some more cast shadows. Now I want to put a fairly dark value in this opening here because I'm going to be painting in a much lighter colour gate later on. And for all these little dark details, any mixture of Payton's Grey or burnt umber will work. And of course a little bit of splatting to get in some random pebble details. And also a little shadow on the underside of all these sandbanks. Very light watery wash of burnt sienna and burnt umber just to give a little bit of texture. A few little tufty grass details here in the green, including a little bit of finger smudging. Same thing over here. A little bit of burnt sienna for the ridge tiles along the top of the roof. Sorry about my hair getting in the way. And the chimney pots. Now all the little details which will help to pull the whole painting together. And if you can, try and paint these with the one brush stroke. Mixed media time, and I'm using this very short cream pastel pencil just to add in a few little stones and pebbles. And of course you could use either some acrylic or some gouache paint for this. And here with a little Payne's Grey and my number 6 brush, I'm just putting some shadows under these pebbles. Next, a yellow pastel pencil for these road markings. Now it might spoil that vintage look of those old railway posters, but I'm going for it anyway. Next, I'm taking my white Posca ink pen and just adding in a few white highlights here and there. I think it's my favourite thing to do at the moment. And here I'm just smudging a little white pastel pencil into the water here. Back to the Posca pen. Right, let's add a few birds. Remember, don't just do little tick shapes. We want different wing positions and different sizes. They aren't a formation flying team, so make sure each one has its own personality. Here some of those stony details look a little bit obvious, so I'm just smudging with a damp tissue. There we go, all done, and this one in just over 3 hours. Now, apologies, there's a few things I did which I didn't film. First of all, those clouds I softened slightly. I added more contrast here in the shadow side of these walls, and I added those 3 white seagulls. Now all I'm going to do is convert this into a 1930s British Railway poster. Now, you really don't need to go to the extent of creating a poster for this painting to work. But if you are, and you're a type-faced nerd like I am, then use the font Gill Sans. It really helps to give that 1930s look. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give it a go, even if you just paint it as a traditional watercolour. And as I always say, make it your own and have fun with the experience. And in the meantime, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment. I do read every single one, can't always reply to them all. And of course, I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another Watercolour Wednesday. Take care everyone, bye for now.